Can't do that.
Oh,
So,
there you go.
Flash of science.
Legitimate public purpose.
if you go in public comment section and give an update, that's fair too. I tried it, see if it works.
All right, are we ready?
Kinda did it.
6:29. Are we on? Are you ready?
I think so.
Twenty-nine.
We need to reset that clock.
Oh, and start.
There you go.
All right, I got 6:30 now. All right, we reconvene into open session to act as deemed appropriate in city council's discretion regarding A, consultation with legal counsel concerning any regular meeting agenda item requiring confidential attorney-client advice.
No action?
B, city manager's performance evaluation, compensation, or employment agreement.
No action.
All right, regular city council meeting is now beginning. Sandra, please note that we have all of our council members except for Mayor Pro Tem Dave Williams. We have Josh, yourself, Danny, our police chief, Aaron, our attorney, Dave with IT. We have Jan, the library services, Chris with golf, Roy, development services, Star with finance, and I believe Eric is supposed to be here at some time. Haven't seen him yet, but he's got an agenda item, so Eric will be here. And we have Donna from administrative services. If you would, please join me. Tonight we have Mr. Denny Henderson, the lead pastor from North Lake Church. To give our invocation, and then please remain standing while we do the Pledge of Allegiance to the U.S. and the Texas flag.
Sounds good. Thanks for having me, Mr. Mayor, council members. Let's pray. Heavenly Father, in your scripture, Jeremiah chapter 29, it tells us to seek the welfare of our city and pray to the Lord on behalf of our city. For when we find its welfare, we will find our welfare. And that's what we do this evening as we open this session. We pray to you because we believe you are a prayer answering God. And so, Father, my prayer this evening is for our leaders of our community as they gather here this evening to do intent to do good and to work on behalf of the people of Lago Vista. We pray, Lord, that you'll bless their efforts. Father, we pray that they'll represent our community fairly. They'll promote the common good that is in the hearts of all of us. Father, we pray that you bless the task before them. We pray that you give them wisdom, clear insight, clarity, impartiality in decisions, and give them strength. Bless their leadership, Lord. And Father, we also pray that and know that you're a merciful God. And so we pray that you will cause your face to shine upon this community. And we recognize that every good and perfect gift does come from you. And in your name, amen.
Amen.
Now, pledge allegiance to the U.S. flag. I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Now the Texas flag.
Honor the Texas flag. I pledge allegiance to thee, Texas, one state under God, one and indivisible.
Thank you. You may be seated. All right, citizen comments. In accordance with the Open Meetings Act, council is prohibited from acting or discussing, other than factual responses to specific questions, any items not on the agenda. All right, first up, I have Dale Mitchell.
Good evening. I'm Dale Mitchell. Carol and I reside at 20908 South Ridge since 1995. Mayor and council members and city manager, it's a pleasure to have you serving us. We know how much work that is and how much time you spend, and I do appreciate your looking after the citizens here in Lago Vista. And I use the full term Lago Vista, the correct term for our city. My topic that I wrote there, Mayor Ed, was successes of ESD 1/7. Those of us who have lived here for a period of time, when we moved here, our fire department was primarily volunteers. A lot of people were just volunteers as they built this city. And it was just kind of a chore for us to provide good fire service for Lago Vista. Things happened. ESD 7, that's what we were at that time, merged with ESD 1, and they kind of then were able to share some of the same resources. And that went on until Chief Norman was hired 5 or 6 years ago. Does it seem like it's been about that amount of time? And I want to tell you that since Chief Norman came on, I view the successes of ESD 1 and subsequently when 7 was the overlay district to be one of the top things that has happened to this part of the North Shore of Travis County. The discipline he brought to that organization was just amazing, and they have grown tremendously. One of the most recent things that came up, of course, is the new ISO rating, where he's been able to get the rating from a 5 to a 2. That will benefit all of us tremendously going forward. One of my concerns I first heard about in June was that the city charged an impact fee to the ESD1 for the two new fire stations being built here. Now, the impact fees are obviously for future needs for building infrastructure in the city, for increased traffic, if the businesses bring it, or if new houses are built, there's going to be increased needs. I cannot think of a detrimental impact that having 2 fire stations in Lago Vista would have. Sure, the employees are going to come to those stations. We don't have a lot of traffic going to them. And having them here is just a tremendous benefit to them. It is somewhat customary in Travis County and the surrounding counties to waive those impact fees. $125,000 of the ESD's money is coming to the city for the impact fees. And so I'm here to say I would hopefully wish that you would reconsider charging that ESD organization those impact fees. Just as a side note, the first thing on your agenda, I believe, is truing up the expenses of this last fiscal year. And those expenses you're truing up amount to about $1.238 million. So $125,000 is only about 10% of what you're trying to true up for the 2018-2019 fiscal year. Thank you for your time. I hope you think about this.
So just a little clarification there, about 60-something thousand of it was impact fees, the rest are permits and stuff. And it will be on the agenda in October. So.
I'll be back.
Next is Ron Smith.
Thank you, Mayor. Ron Smith, 20609 Oak Ridge. I'm here tonight for the Firewise Town Hall. To make you aware of that, I left every one of you a flyer up there for the rest of the audience. We have a Firewise Town Hall coming up on October the 14th. It will be in the library here in Lago Vista. If you can make it, fine. If you have other things to do, I understand. A couple of things I want you to know. Back in July 18th, this council was kind enough to donate $2,500 to the Firewise organization. And we said we were going to go out and get other monies from surrounding communities. Just an update on that. Jonestown has approved $900. Point Venture approved $500 last night. Waterford POA kicked in another $100 for a total of $4,000. So Lago Vista is not the only one paying for this Firewise. We're getting the whole region to pay for it. Secondly, This Firewise event that we're having, where you're going to start seeing a bunch of communications flowing out. We do have we turned in a request for the Lago Vista marquee on Loman 4 to announce it. We've also got Jonestown to put it up on their LED board as you go through Jonestown in front of their city hall. Various Facebook posts will go out. We do plan on having 2 speakers, one from ESD and one from the Texas Forest Service. Both will be in uniform. And we just hope that all of you can make it. We hope the citizens can make it. We have a lot of new people that have moved into the region right now. They do not understand the fire danger necessarily. They come from very wet areas in many cases. They don't understand droughts and fires like we do. And so this is an attempt to get them up the learning curve, as well as re-educating those that have been here for a while as to what's happening. That's it.
Thank you. Jane Brunslick.
My name is Jane Brunslick. I live at 21815 Tallahassee. As the individual that initiated our dark sky ordinances, I'm here to tell you how terribly disappointed I am with our city staff and our council and our mayor. In August, I wrote to the entire council, the mayor, Mr. Jambor, and our city manager, telling them that there were a lot of new builds around my area, and they were not in compliance with the dark sky ordinances that were passed on June 21st, 2018, 15 months ago. I thank the city manager and the mayor for answering right away. The rest of the city council didn't hear from any of you, so thanks a lot. Anyway, the city manager did point out that some places like Vista Bella that's lit up like, anyway, their permit, and I confirm this, was before the date of our ordinance is going into effect. But he also let me know that if I saw anything else, let him know the addresses. You know what? That's not my job. And I got another email from Greg DeLong, our enforcement officer, said, you know, the police would be looking for people who were not in accordance with our ordinances. Well, that's not their job either. It's easy to walk by any new build and see if they've got the right kind of lighting. But anyway, I was also told that we couldn't enforce our ordinances because we hadn't gotten our certification for dark sky, which I don't understand because a law is a law. An ordinance is an ordinance. So, and I was told we'd applied for that certification from the International Dark Sky Organization. Well, then I contacted a city council member who was gracious enough to help me out and find out we had not even applied for that ordinance. So, I am extremely disappointed by all of you. We've had no education. We don't enforce our ordinances. Why bother? Thank you.
Thank you. Next I have Steve Becker.
Good evening. My name is Steve Becker. I live at 21407 Blue Jay down in Emerald Bend. And we've lived here for 18 months. We came from Chicago. And 18 months ago, I would have told you 2 things, that we came here to be closer to our kids and grandkids in Cedar Park, and we came here to play golf. We had checked out, there's lots of golf courses around. We play golf all the time, so we came here for that. We've played golf twice in 18 months, but we now play pickleball 4 times a week. And we love it, and it's become really the center of where we got all of our friends, and it continues to build. we started playing, Mitch got us going just on Mondays and Sundays, and now it's Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and we've got a brand-new group where we bring in newbies on Tuesday nights. And not all of our people are back yet from Colorado and New Mexico and all the colder places they go during the winter here. So when they get back, we're going to have routinely 16 to 20 players down there all the time. And we have 2 courts. So I'm here just to ask for consideration. I know the budget's up and there might be some money available for that. If we can just stripe the 4 additional courts on the tennis court down by the Lago Vista golf course, just stripe them. And the players are willing to put up the money to buy the temporary nets. They would be temporary nets, so we wouldn't interrupt the golfers. And they could play whenever they wanted, but we would have times in the morning when they're not there when we could put up our temporary nets and play pickleball and accommodate all the players that we have. So that's my request. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, that's all I have that are signed up, other than ones that are specific agenda items. So I'll save those until we get to those agenda items. But at this time, if there's anybody who did not sign up who would like to speak and just a general comment, please do so at this time. All right. We will now go into items of community interest. Pursuant to Texas Government Code Section 551.0415, the City Council may report on any of the following items: expressions of thanks, gratitude, and condolences, information regarding holiday schedules, recognition of individuals or proclamations, reminders regarding City Council events, reminders regarding community events, and health and safety announcements. All right, first of all, I would like to give a shout out to the people that put on the homecoming parade and event that took place last night right out here in front of City Hall. It was fantastic. I did not get back in time to see the actual parade, but I did get here at about 7 o'clock and did attend the car bashing and all the other events, and it was very nice. So it was a fantastic turnout for a first annual event. So very impressive. Anybody else?
I would also like to add my congratulations to the individuals who did the parade. Mr. Robbins and I both got in a car and rode and threw candy. Had a fantastic time. The turnout was great. Thank City of Lago Vista for coming out and supporting it. And kudos to the people that organized it, set it up. It's very, very nice.
All right, one more item. This week, we are celebrating Constitution Week. I don't know, I put a little thing out there, so you might have seen it when you were coming in. This week is Constitution Week. I have a little thing they gave to me. Little known facts about the Constitution. September 17th, 1787, 39 delegates signed the U.S. Constitution. Thomas Jefferson and John Adams did not sign the Constitution because they were both out of the country serving as U.S. ministers to France and Great Britain. The oldest person to sign the Constitution was 81 years old. He was Mr. Benjamin Franklin. The Constitution was signed. The United States population was at 4 million. Today it's over 327 million. It took 100 days to frame the Constitution. George Washington and James Madison were the only presidents who signed the Constitution. And the word democracy does not appear ever in the Constitution. And I have this proclamation. Whereas the Constitution of the United States of America the guardian of our liberties, embodies the principles of limited government in a republic dedicated to rule by law, and whereas September 17th, 2019 marks the 232nd anniversary of the framing of the Constitution of the United States of America by the Constitutional Convention, and whereas it is fitting and proper to accord official recognition to this magnificent document and its memorable anniversary, and to the patriotic celebrations which will commemorate it, and whereas Public Law 915 guarantees the issuing of a proclamation each year by the President of the United States of America designating September 17th through the 23rd as Constitution Week. Now, therefore, I, Ed Tidwell, by virtue of the authority vested in me as mayor of the city of Lago Vista, Texas, do hereby proclaim the week of September 17th through 23rd as Constitution Week, and to ask our citizens to reaffirm the ideals the framers of the Constitution had in 1787 by vigilantly protecting the freedoms guaranteed to us through this guardian of our liberties. In witness thereof, I have hereunto set my hand and caused the official seal of the city of Lago Vista, Texas, to be affixed this 19th day of September 2019. Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, I do have one other thing.
Yes.
Saturday morning, starting at 8 o'clock, Lions Club will be having a pancake breakfast at the Allegiance Fire Station here in Lago Vista. This is going to be a donation-only breakfast. There will be no tickets. There's no set fee. The funds from this will be used to help the new fire stations purchase items that they need to set up their kitchens, additional items that they may need for their new fire stations. If you can come out and help support the fire stations, get some pancakes, bacon, orange juice, coffee, milk, all you can eat, we would love to have you out. Please come join us.
Thank you. All right. Stand by. We're going to move into action items. All right, number 3. Discussion, consideration, and possible action regarding ordinance number 19-09-19-01, an ordinance of the City Council of the City of Lago Vista, Texas, pursuant to Vernon's Texas Codes Annotated, Local Government Code, Chapter 102, Section 102.007B, providing for amendments to ordinance number 19-09-20-01 for the fiscal year beginning October 1, 2018 and ending September 30, 2019. Amendments to said budget by department are set forth in Exhibit A attached to this ordinance. And
Mayor, if I may,
you have the lead on this?
please, sir. What you have presented in front of council now, these items are for the current FY19 budget that'll end on September 30th, 2019. What staff is presenting to council is any amendments to the actual operating budget that potentially will exceed the dollars that have been budgeted in the current year. The ordinance includes the amendments to that budget, and then the exhibit shows the items that are being requested to have those changes. What I want to point out is that the changes to the expenditures are only to the expenditure budgets. The annual audit will actually give us the final audited numbers for the year and determine the actual expenditures and revenues for the operating FY19 year.
So at this moment, they're potential.
Yes, sir. One good example, Mayor, and I drew attention to this in the staff summary, is on the utility account, we have on the second page of the exhibit, we have water services and sewer services. One of the line items you'll see is water tap and extension expenses for water, and then you'll see sewer extension expense for wastewater. The line that was budgeted for the year on water tap and extension expenses of $400,000. Based on the new growth that we've seen this year, there's an additional $420,000 that council's being asked to amend the expenditure budget. The total line would go from $400,000 for the year to $820,000. And then on the opposite side of that, Mayor, that's the expense side that we're asking for. There are revenues that offset these expenses. And so the revenues are realized inside of the utility fund revenues. And so that's just an example of how these lines are changed throughout the year based on increased use and capacity. You see a lot of that in the utility services.
Are all these coming out of departmental revenues?
All the items, the expenditures will come out of the departmental revenues, and all of the revenues with these changes will still exceed the expenditures for the year. That'll be confirmed after the audit, Mayor, but yes, they're all covered through revenues. None of these changes would result in a fund balance appropriation of general fund or utility fund.
Questions, comments?
Just a word of clarification. Basically, this is just a bookkeeping thing that needs to be done to bring our books into balance for the audit.
Mayor, it's definitely a bookkeeping function, and the budget is entirely a bookkeeping function of our operation so that we're operating annual expenses based on what has been approved by council. And yes, to make sure we're in line with the annual audit, it ties in. There's another good example, if you look on here. One of the things we started at the beginning of the year for the aviation fund was the fuel service. We budgeted for, where's the number? Wait for it. We budgeted for $130,000 of fuel. We're asking council to increase that by $35,000, which would take it from $130,000 to $165,000. Same kind of plan. There's a definite revenue stream that shows that all of the fuel that we've purchased we're selling, and so the revenue item exceeds that expenditure item. But it needs to be in to our budget document to show that increase.
So,
Mayor, I'd like to make a motion.
so hold on just a second.
Right, I understand.
I was just looking at the bottom to see if there was a running total of all of them, but each one's separate. Okay. Any more questions or comments from council? All right, I have Ron Smith.
Okay, Ron Smith, 20609 Oak Ridge. There's about 5 of them here I'm interested in. Number one, when I came on the council back in 2010, we had 3 major lawsuits in progress. And when we left, we had 0. And here I notice a 38% increase in legal. I'm just trying to figure out, the one thing this sheet doesn't tell you is why these expenses went up. And so that's really what I'm focusing on, is why did they go up? So for example, on legal, you know, what caused a $55,000 increase?
Mayor, if I may on that one, the legal's exactly what you were saying earlier. The last lawsuit that existed actually had a settlement that the city entered into. We paid it out of that legal line instead of paying it out of a fund balance reserve. So instead of dipping into reserve to pay that, which happened at the beginning of the year, we paid it out of regular operating funds.
Okay. Second one, disposal service, 75,000. That's up about 11%. What's causing that? Is that the growth?
Mayor, if I may? Exactly. It's all new. We budgeted 700,000. We're asking for 75,000 additional. It's all the new services for the year. Again, that's a perfect example of the revenues are there to offset the expenses, but it's new accounts.
Okay, so if,
We also had a flood in there too that caused us some additional.
oh, okay, I remember that. Okay, the next one, $57,000 for golf transfer. What would cause $57,000 of expenses?
Mayor? Same kind of thing. So we have,
Is it growth?
it's the growth. It's the lack of growth. We do have a couple situations for the year, and so when we talk about that golf course budget, we went last year, we went aggressive. We know that the ability to reduce those expenditures has been a challenge and to increase the revenue. So the only thing that didn't happen is the revenue didn't increase. After the audit, I feel that the number is going to be a lot closer to 450,000. That's my thought. The 57,000 is the financial projection that we're being presented right now, and that's the estimate provided by finance.
Well, that number should be a pretty firm number by this point in time in the budget. It just seemed 57,000 for expenses to go up. I'm just trying to figure out what you bought.
So back to the flood, there's one thing there that's saying it should be pretty finite. Looking at the expenses, it is there. There are some revenue things that we're projecting what the revenue would be for this month. We saw revenues at 79,000. Every month after April, we've seen our revenues drop down to between 44,000 and 55,000.
Yeah, that's hot out there.
Again, we can make an excuse on temperature, people not liking golf, or Steve playing pickleball. But what we do see is, back to the flood, we did have overtime hours that we used at the beginning of the year for that. We are going through a process of requesting the reimbursements based on those fund dollars through FEMA. Potentially, there's $19,000 that go back into those operational funds
That's all we
From
got,
there.
is 19,000 back on reimbursement?
for golf course.
Right.
Total
Right.
reimbursement would be approximately 84,000.
Yeah, I was gonna say, it should be higher than that.
There's no loss of revenue from FEMA based on this that we can claim, so it's only on certain particulars, unfortunately.
And then over to the biggies, the water and sewer taps, the ones that doubled. In that number, is that a reflection of the use of contractors, or is that a reflection of what?
Mayor? It's contractors and what? So it's the growth, which is the what, the contractors to make sure we catch up and to make sure we didn't have any kind of backlog. We can point out the fact that for the longest time, this council and previous council had concerns that there was a backlog and we were holding up developers and they weren't able to open up and get COs for their houses. So we did a hybrid of contract local plumbers to help us with that and city crews to do it. And so it's a hybrid of the growth and contract labor.
So are we caught up?
Yes, sir. We are caught up and we are on schedule with any line extensions for any developer in the city.
And we have the skill on staff to do stuff in-house, or is this all still outhoused? I'm sorry, subcontract.
We don't outhouse hardly anything except for, never mind. Yes, sir. We're doing these, most of these items are now completed in-house.
All right, that's all.
Thank you. All right, that's the only person I have signed up for that actual agenda item. Is there anybody else in the audience who would like to comment on the amendments? Yes, sir.
If I might, Mayor Ed, this is probably one of the most embarrassing items you ever have on the agenda. We did it all the time because you only have to, by the state regs, show how the expenditures exceeded your budget. And you could have an addendum when you do present it to the council for this approval that showed actually the revenues that increased that cover those expenses. You could have a separate sheet that showed that, and it wouldn't be so hard to explain why you have all these high expenditures.
Thank you. Anyone else? All right, anything else from council? All right, this is an action item, so at this time, I'll entertain action.
Mayor, I move that we approve ordinance number 19-09-19-01.
I'll second it.
All right, I have a motion and a second. Any further comments? All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed, nay. Hearing none, motion carries unanimous. All right, number 4. Discussion 4A. Discussion, consideration, and possible action regarding ordinance number 19-09-19-02, an ordinance of the City of Lago Vista, Texas, adopting a budget for the fiscal year beginning October 1st, 2019, and ending September 30th, 2020, appropriating the various amounts thereof, and repealing all ordinances or parts of ordinances in conflict therewith, and providing for an effective date. Josh?
Thanks, Mayor. So this item is, I would say, one of the most important things we do annually, and it's establishing the fiscal year operating budget for the upcoming FY 2020 year, basically. What we have in the budget is we're proposing $26,835,596 in expenditures. Going back to what Mr. Mitchell was referring to, the revenues for that year are projected at $28,013,655. What we're including in there's the ordinance, and there's also the attachment that goes with this item. In that attachment, we have our consolidated statement, we have our line item budget, we have our debt service, and we also have our 5-year CIP, Mayor. So if the council adopts the budget for next year, you'll effectively be adopting all of those items included in the exhibit. At this time, the presented budget has a tax rate of 65 cents per $100, and it includes all of our utility funds with separate funds set out for general fund, utility fund. This year, we set out aviation, we have golf course, we have capital projects, and we have impact fees, park funds, and I think that's all of them, Mayor. And the hot tax. We have had 6 public hearings for the consideration of the budget and public hearings for the tax rate. And one last note, this item is completely separate, even though I've stated the tax rate, it's completely separate from the next item, which deals directly with ratification of a tax rate.
So, questions, comments on the budget? All right, hearing none from council, I do have some people in the audience that have signed up. Go to this. All right, first I have Irene Carrillo.
My name's Irene Carrillo. I live at 3800 Clinton Lane. I'm a member of the Park and Recreation Advisory Committee, and I'm requesting to retain the position in the budget of the park manager. I would like it to be a certified position. I have a list by the National Recreation and Park Association of what a park manager does, and there's a lot of items. Communication, finance, human resources, operations, and a lot of planning. And I'd like you to consider keeping that within the budget. I don't know who would be doing the planning if we don't have a park manager to supervise that. Thank you.
And the park manager is in the budget.
Pardon?
The park manager position is in our budget.
Someone told me it was being cut.
Mayor, if I may, as the budget's presented right now, that Parks and Recreation Director position is included in the budget as it's presented right now.
Okay. Thank you.
But Mayor, if we move forward with that position, I would get a copy of that information you had
Sure.
and gladly use that. If it's not a position that's been in the city before, so we'll create that new job description and we'll use any information that anyone has.
Right, next I have David White.
Good evening, David White, 7625 White Oak. I am the chairman of the Parks and Recreation Advisory Board, and I just want to kind of echo what Irene has said. 4 years ago, this council honored me by selecting me to be on the Parks Board. And I feel over 4 years, I think everybody has now rotated off except me. Y'all passed a strategic plan back 4 or 5 years ago to build a park, and we have begun that process. We're very excited about that process. And we did request to council that we do have a director of Parks and Recreation. And we're here tonight to support that, and hopefully the council will include that in their budget. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, that is the only two I have signed up for this item. Is there anybody else in the audience who would like to address 4A, the budget? All right. Anything else from council? All right, it's an action item, and at this time, I will accept any action.
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to make a motion that we pass ordinance number 19-09-19-02.
I'll second.
All right, I have a motion and a second. Any further questions? All right, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, no. Hearing none, motion carries unanimous.
Mr.
All right.
Mayor, actually, we need to take a roll call vote.
No,
Okay,
I'm here.
Your ordinance is laid out for a roll call vote on this item.
thank you.
By place?
All right, so place one,
Absolutely.
absent, okay. He's pro tem, I don't know him as place one. Place two,
Aye.
place three,
Aye.
place four,
Aye.
place five,
aye.
place six.
Aye.
Myself, aye. So we have 6 ayes, 0 nays. All right. Now we'll go to B. Consider ratification of the portion of the fiscal year 2019-20 budget reflecting an increase in property tax revenues.
Mayor, this item, as previously described, is to set the tax rate for the year. And as we've worded, the tax rate, if it stays the same at 65 cents per $100 of valuation, would generate increased revenue for the city over the revenue from FY19, which is the current fiscal year. The tax rate has been the same for 6 years. If it were to remain the same next year, that would be 7 years. But over that period of time, the revenue line that the city has received has increased annually. So effectively, the tax value to the city for the ad valorem tax has increased, even if the tax rate has remained the same number.
And that's due to all the 13% growth that we've had over the last 2 years.
The growth, Mayor, and the valuations increase.
Right.
One of the questions, Mayor, that when you weren't here last week, that Ms. Brunslick asked was the part of it was what is the average homestead? We looked at this earlier. We restated that back out. The average taxable value of a property with a homestead exemption for the upcoming year is $217,061. That number last year was $202,571. So effectively, 1 penny on the tax rate for that house is $21.70. Looking at 4 pennies or back to the rollback rate, then 21 times 4, therefore, is 84, $85, $86 for the year. That's the difference in what the tax rate is versus a rollback rate.
Well, going back to our August 29th meeting that we had, the public hearing and stuff, when we first got our numbers back from the county, and we found out what our effective rate was, and our rollback rate was, and what our current rate is. I had asked that we consider a rate lower than the 65 cents. And I'm still leaning that way. I believe because of the growth and the opportunities that we have had with the home values and stuff, that we have an opportunity to lower our tax rate at this time from 65 cents to a number lower than that, whether it be the rollback rate of 61 cents or something in between. I believe we owe that to the citizens of Lago Vista to lower our tax rate. And so it is my recommendation that we do not stay at the 65 cents per hundred. I would recommend something like 63 cents. Anybody
Mr. Mayor?
else? Yes.
I can understand wanting to decrease our taxes. I don't personally enjoy paying taxes, and paying less taxes is attractive. However, the Texas legislature this year passed laws that are going to be devastating to many of our cities, many of our counties across the state. The cutback to 3.5% for Travis County in the next year is going to significantly reduce their ability to provide services. There's already discussion about having to decrease the sheriff's department, police departments, Round Rock, Georgetown, Austin, have all been having discussions about how they're going to be able to employ enough police to maintain their departments. At this particular point in time, because of these cutbacks set up by the state, I do not feel that it's an appropriate time to be cutting the tax rate. I don't know what's going to happen in the next couple of years. I have no way of being able to know what's going to happen as far as the county is concerned, as far as other cities around us are concerned. 65 cents is where we have been. We have not changed or raised our tax rate over the last 5 years. I know that I personally am experiencing a significant increase in my taxes this year because of evaluation. But in my personal opinion, this is not the time to be cutting our tax rate back. We need to keep those funds in our city coffers because we very well may need them. There may be requirements to increase our police force, to increase the number of people that we have to have for services to take care of things that the county is taking care of now. And at this point, I really can't be in favor of a reduction in the tax rate.
Mayor, if I may,
Yes, sir.
I'd like to echo the same sentiments that were expressed by the gentleman. I'd like to also add that in doing a comparison of the other two cities around us that have about the same population, those cities being Marble Falls and Vernon, I've looked at their budget. Our reliance on property taxes for our revenue ends up being about 84% of our total general fund amount. When you look at Marble Falls, their reliance is only on 20% for their revenue sources coming from property taxes. And we look at Burnett, there's just 32%. So our 80% is huge in comparison to these other two cities. We don't have the luxury that they have of being able to collect a lot of sales tax. So for that reason, I would like to say that I would be very much in favor of keeping the 65 cents per $100 valuation.
Mr. Mayor, I also agree in keeping the level at, what do we have right now? 50% of the taxes that we pay are LVISD. 30% and less of the taxes that you pay, between 30 and 23%, is Lago Vista. So the majority of that is that Travis and ESD and our remaining. Now you can look up your tax, Travis County Appraisal District, TCAD, you can look up anybody else's taxes, what they pay. Me personally, the difference of lowering it from the 0.65 to 0.6103 or anything less is $10 a month. So I feel that $10 a month, I would not begrudge anybody for lowering their taxes. It may be a little bit for me, but I think it would be devastating for the city as a whole. I haven't been here as long as a lot of the people in town, but I can remember 2008. I searched the city and there was a Gary Player golf course. I'm going, oh, this is all right. When I got here, the lake was dry. Docks were matchsticks. There was a boat in the middle of the river, and I always wondered, how did that get there and how long it been to get there? And I wanted to go into this cove and search for arrowheads with my grandson, but then it flooded, which was great. But things change, and right now we're down 20 houses in the previous year, new starts. It's not a good trend. We've been high-fiving for a period of time about our growth. And the lake is down because we can see the lake now. It was white, now it's grass. On a macro, federal government things that have occurred yesterday that impact us. The Fed took two actions yesterday. They pumped $80 billion into the economy, and they lowered interest rates. In the Great Depression, people said there was no money, and there wasn't. When you hear the term that the people didn't have 2 cents to rub together, was true. There was no money in the economy. So now when things get dicey, the Fed pumps money into the economy. So they kind of figure it's a little bit dicey. Interest rates went down, which is good for mortgages, about 1/4 point, but the president wants to go to 0, which would be not good. But if you go down to 2.5%, it's not good for banks. It's good for mortgages, good for credit cards. But what we're going to see the banks are planning to do now is to charge you to hold your money because they can't make money on the low percentage rate that they've got. If you look at the airlines, Spirit and the rest of them started charging $10 a bag for baggages. People didn't complain. American and the rest of them started charging. They made $350 million on baggage. So people know that we will pay these charges. Now, that is a benefit to us, this low interest rates and our tax rate, because we are debt adverse, as people have mentioned. But I have no problem using bonds as a force multiplier if it's a favorable environment. So when you get in one of these things where they're cutting interest rates, people are looking to where can I save, buy money that's safe, and the municipal bonds are the best. Bonds are based on risk. Homeowners insurance, if you've got a biting dog, it's risk. If you think stop signs are a suggestion on your automobile insurance, that's risk. So bondholders will look at us and go, we are excellent. We do have revenue. We do have growth. But what's our risk? And our risk would be good for another year by keeping this same interest rate. Because they want to look at how long we're going to go. Now, if we start to reduce streams, and the risk goes up because we're lowering our revenue stream.
The other thing is personal risk. If we start to do this slide, we're going to slide. And we're not going to be able to recover. In order to recover, if it's 3%, 3.5%, whatever it is, we have to have an election to increase our tax rates. That would, if we take these slides, that would be less than our current rate now. And who's going to want to vote for that? Now that, unless we have to, but that would come into fruition 3, 4, 5 years from now. So all members of this panel are running for re-election. I plan on running for re-election. If I get on it, that'd be 2 years before years, but at that, don't expect to go past that. But at that period of time, if the things go as they are, then we would be putting the city in a difficult position. We would not have money, we wouldn't have things to grow, and I'd be leaving whoever took my place holding a bag of trying to increase revenue if it's available. So I'm sorry, it's a micro, it's a macro, but I want to keep it as it is. Thank you.
Don, Frank? No? Don? All right. I do not have anybody signed up for 4B, but if there's anybody in the audience who would like to address 4B, which is the actual rate, not the budget, do so at this time.
Good evening. My name is Paul Roberts, 5312 Lago Drive. I wasn't planning on speaking, so you have to forgive me a little bit, and I'm not accustomed to speaking in front of a city government, so I'm a little nervous. A couple of things just come to mind listening to this conversation, debate amongst the council. Off the cuff, I can't help but to agree with the logic that you guys just gave for wanting to keep this rate. We need the revenue. If we don't have revenue, how do we fund the infrastructure repairs? Where's the money going to come from? Mr. Collins was just speaking about the Fed fund rates. I trade stocks a little bit here and there. I invest some. And you nailed it on the head when you're talking about bond rates. Bonds are down. They're going way down. It's a good time to borrow money if you're a municipality. But there's also a lot of leading economic indicators right now going on that are predicting a recession. 53%, a Merrill Lynch thing I just read yesterday, talking about 53% of fund managers polled expecting a recession within the next year. I've been watching some of this stuff come across my newsfeed for the past 3 months. ECB, Draghi, he's leaving. They're leaving open the door for more central bank easing. We have had, I think we got a 2% print on GDP recently, but I think it actually dropped. My point is this, we're going to be entering a recessionary cycle at some point. We've had a bull run for 10 years. It's going to pull back. We're seeing those indicators. We've got PMI readings, manufacturing PMI reading that came in below 50. That's contraction. Manufacturing tends to lead. FedEx stock just took a big hit the other day. They're a leading indicator. Trucking is down. Shipping is down. You've got a lot of macro indicators going on. Whether or not you get a deal with China, for example, on the trade war, that's not going to be that's going to be a sell the news event. My point is this, is we're coming up on a recession. Eventually, they happen, they're cyclical. We need that revenue stream. Housing is going to slow down. Construction is going to slow down. The permits are going to slow down. And I think your revenue streams are going to come to dry up. We need good infrastructure. We need things to bring developers in and sustain us through those downturns. That's it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Anybody else? All right, anything else from council? All right, this is an action item. So at this time, I'll entertain an action. Aaron, is this a roll call vote as well?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, it is.
Mr. Mayor, The motion would be for the ratification of the portion of the FY 1920 budget reflecting an increase in the property tax revenues. Is that the appropriate motion?
Yes, Councilmember.
So made.
Second.
Who seconded it?
Me.
Tim seconded. All right, I have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All right, we will start with place 2.
Aye.
Aye.
Place 3. Place 4.
Aye.
Place 5.
Aye.
Place 6.
Aye.
Myself, y'all have convinced me. I'll go ahead and vote aye with this as well. Motion
Let the
carries,
record reflect that Councilmember Williams was absent.
and Williams is absent. Motion carries. 6 ayes, 0 nays. All right, we will go to number 5. Discussion, consideration, and possible action regarding ordinance number 19-09-19-03, an ordinance of the city of Lago Vista, Texas, levying ad valorem taxes for use and support of the municipal government of the city of the fiscal year beginning October 1, 2019, and terminating September 30, 2020, providing for apportioning each levy for specific purposes, and providing when taxes shall become due and when same shall become delinquent if not paid.
Mayor, this item is the third in line for how we go through an annual budget adoption. First, I know it seems a little weird to some people. First, you adopt the budget, then you adopt the tax rate, and then after that, you define the tax levy and determine how those dollars will be spent for the items that you approve first. So it does everything you read, Mayor. One of the things I want to point out is that the maintenance and operations portion of the 0.5 cent tax rate is 0.3893, and the interest and sinking is 0.2607. Those are included within this ordinance. And again, it goes back to determining how we're going to pay our debt service, how we're going to pay for maintenance and operations, and then the dollars that'll be used for all other items that were approved with the adopted budget.
Questions, comments? Anybody from the audience who would like to address this one? All right, hearing none, it's an action item.
Mayor, I move that we adopt ordinance 19-09-19-03.
I'll second.
All right, I have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Roll call vote as well?
Yes, sir.
All right, place 2.
Aye.
Place 3.
Aye.
Place 4.
Aye.
Place 5.
Aye.
Place 6.
Aye.
And myself, aye. Motion carries. Oh, and Dave Williams is absent. Motion carries 6-0. All right, we now go into public hearing and possible action. The Lago Vista City Council is holding a public hearing to consider ordinance number 19-09-19-04, an ordinance by the City Council of Lago Vista, Texas, amending the official zoning map by changing the zoning district of approximately 4.3546 acres of the W.A. Cook Survey Number 100, abstract number 2605, located on the south side of Boggy Ford Road, immediately west of the intersection of Draper's Cove, from R1E Single Family Residential to R4 Multifamily Residential. And the public hearing is currently open. We will start with staff presentation.
Mayor and fellow council members, primarily, even though the discussion predates the last council meeting by a little bit and certainly went on during it and following it, The discussion mainly involved conditions. I think everybody was aware that there were some fairly unique things about this property, the lack of depth on this property, if you will, compared to most R4 properties, as well as the lack of depth in the property that was behind it, imposed some conditions that could be mitigated with the imposition of conditions. And we certainly had conversations with the city attorney, and subsequent to all those discussions, we decided what we should do is generate a fairly concise and accurate set of conditions for the consideration of the council. However, one of the things we wanted to do before doing that, the applicant had made certain assumptions about the way he was going to design the property that suggested that the garages might be in the front and that the driveways and all that would be in the front of the property rather than in the rear. And we kind of thought that might be inefficient. We asked him to look at some alternatives, discuss it with his engineer, and make that determination whether all that was going to be in the front or the back so that we could gear our conditions to that potential solution. He came back with us, confirmed that he thought it would be better for a number of reasons, that if the driveways were in the rear, or at least the primary driveway was in the rear that accessed the property. And we then created a set of conditions that were based on that. There were a couple of numbers that we had, made some assumptions that we thought were accurate. When we met with him after creating that set and sharing them with him, he pointed out a potential design variation that would in fact reduce some of those numbers and potentially increase the yield. I'm not 100% convinced that those changes are cost effective, but they are plausible. So, and it's not our role to tell him what's cost effective or not, but they are plausible. So we adjusted our numbers to reflect his desires. He also had, I believe it's condition number 6, that deals about the location of windows. He objected to that, and we agreed, and I think we transmitted his objection to the height of those windows as being something that he didn't want to particularly considered. We delivered that message to you, and it's certainly up to you to hear his responses in that regard and make a decision accordingly.
Questions?
There's the conditions. Do y'all have the conditions?
Yeah, they should be ready to put on the screen.
There's not a condition about rear access or the driveways in the back, correct? Or am I not reading it correctly?
Well, yeah, but the presumption is that they will be there. The idea is that if they were to be in front and you use the 25-foot build-to line, there's no room for garages or driveways or any of that stuff to be there. It wouldn't necessarily be redundant to include that, but we don't think it's physically possible to do that with the other conditions that are there.
Not physically possible to have a front garage.
And a driveway in the front.
If you only do the 25-foot setback.
If you have to build at 25 feet, you can't get a driveway that's parallel to Boggy Ford, which this requires. You follow me?
No.
It requires a
sorry.
25-foot build-to line. Okay?
Well, but that's the standard setback for,
Right.
and we all have there's tons of garages that are
If you only have
with
two.
a 25-foot setback.
But he's limited to the 2 driveway accesses, right? So what you would have is a driveway, a 90-degree turn, and then another 90-degree turn to get into a garage. So,
I agree with your point,
yeah.
but that's not a condition. That's what I'm asking
Right.
about.
We didn't include it because the other conditions kind of preclude
Yeah.
it, but it wouldn't hurt to add that.
What would you say then? What would be the additional language that we might add?
Garages and driveways parallel to Boggy Ford would be prohibited anywhere in the front yard. You would be limited to those probably one and two. And a lot of that has to do with the need for queuing space.
Right, no,
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, without it, you're in trouble.
He and I have been through this, so
Yeah.
we've looked at the numbers, you're right.
Even if it were slightly redundant, it doesn't hurt anything to include that condition.
Anybody else have questions, comments?
My comment would be to go ahead and include that.
Yeah.
Even though it may be a redundant condition.
Slightly. I mean, it's implied, but, implications are not as good as statements.
Yeah. I'd rather have the statement.
I hear you. I didn't occur to me that I needed it, but now it does.
Are we discussing all of the different conditions at this point? Or
Well, I don't know about discussing it. I can answer questions. I mean, the applicant
Okay.
certainly need, the discussion probably ought to come after he
Okay.
speaks.
Mr. Attry?
Russ Attry, 918 Savannah Lane. Probably in number 2, you could add that we talked about 2 egresses and the driveway permitted, and we could probably put that the internal road runs along the rear of the property. There's 2 ways to face the house. The garage can face the fence, or the garage can face a short cul-de-sac. So the rear road covers both of them.
Yeah, that's a good place to add it.
Anybody have questions for Mr. Attry?
Let me see.
The number 6, is that still on there?
It's on there, but the idea was that it's easy for them to exclude it
Right.
rather than reading it.
So just under number 6 about the windows, if you can visualize going into a child's bedroom, and the window being at 5'6" and then going up. And I spent a day driving around Lago Vista looking at as many 2-stories as I could locate. And there wasn't one 2-story home overlooking a single-family home that had a window at 5'6" off the ground. So I'd be the first. Doesn't seem fair.
I believe a bedroom window is an emergency means of egress, so that would not fall under number 6.
But it could open up a line for discussion. How high does the egress window have to be? And with neighbors and whatnot, I'd rather not have to argue over it. And in there somewhere, we're planting trees on every 25-foot center that are going to be 20 foot tall in the air. The trees certainly should do what a 1 or 2 windows, should solve any problem with the neighbors, is my thought. I just need the hands to be a little bit free and not totally handcuffed. Any other topics have any questions on that?
I have one question. I'm trying to find it in this revised list of conditions. One of the ones that I saw early on had to do with having a fence or a wall on the side facing the neighbor that you would have.
Right, we have a fence that's whatever the legal height should be with no slats, in other words, no light going through it as a condition. Right now, I believe it's at a 6-foot height. I think the city's going to change to an 8-foot height, and that would be as tall as the fence would be. And then in front of that fence line, we first plant the trees on 25-foot centers, and then intermingled between a buffer would be a green wall, hedges, something that would grow rather rapidly and basically hide the hedge. I think it's going to be I think it'll look good.
This would be a stockade fence, is that the idea?
Sorry, I'm not sure the terminology would be some kind.
A wooden fence.
Yeah, or a concrete, depending on the cost. I've never put a fence up that's concrete, so I have no idea, but I'm looking for totally non-maintenance. Last thing I need is to
Right.
put something up that's going to need maintenance every 4 to 5 years, and then try and get through the existing green lines.
Yes, sir. That's
You know.
that was my point. I I personally would like to see it be a stone fence. That would be a fence that would not require, not a fence, but a wall, a stone wall. That would not require any maintenance.
It might be a cost prohibitive to have a stone wall back there. I mean, I don't know. I think probably the ones the Department of Highways use with the concrete that are poured and have fence boards in the mold, that's probably the most economical, I would think.
Well, I was thinking about the neighbors having the possibility that if you were to construct a stockade fence or a wooden fence, that eventually those pickets would dry and separate and allow both sun and noise to come through. Whereas if you had a stone fence, that wouldn't be possible. That would never ever occur.
Yeah.
Not naturally.
Again, I wish I could tell you I had more experience with the cost of doing a stone fence, and it would have to be double-sided. I don't think it would be could be single-sided, depending on the height we go. 8 foot, probably have to be stone on each side, maybe, I don't know.
Well,
Or the large blocks, and then
Yeah,
they
stone
they're
blocks.
$100 a block, whatever
Yeah.
that works out to be.
Yeah, I have no idea about cost. I was just thinking
Yeah.
more in terms of protection for the neighbors against noise and that sort of thing.
Yeah.
I think we can put in the conditions and stuff, but I don't think it's our position to tell him exactly how he's got to.
That would be my condition.
Can we do an 8-foot fence?
No,
No, 6, I think.
6 feet max.
Well, that would be a condition that I would favor having.
I don't have in front of me the report. Do we have a?
No, I saw it earlier.
Oh, no, I mean, this is something else, a definitive number on the neighborhood responses?
I have received 14 lot owners that I have here in front of me. 14 lot owners of the 48 that are opposed. I have 0 in favor. I have 14 lot owners opposed. But I think it's 20% of the total property, not the number. So we don't know, unless somebody's done the numbers, I don't know if that
We don't have the ratio.
over,
I do not.
okay. At this time, yeah.
What'd you say?
Well, the statute that I think the mayor might be referring to is a state statute that requires a signed petition that would require a supermajority. And we don't have a signed petition. Only pursuant to that signed petition would we do the calculations. We turn that over to GIS. They do the calculations and determine whether it represents 20% of the property. And of course, the statute makes it clear that the property also includes the right of way in that area, the 200-foot boundary, so.
So these notice of public hearings, where people are able to express their opinion of whether they're in favor or opposed,
That has nothing to do with that statute. It's
have nothing to do.
Separate requirement.
Do we need to apply that? No?
Yeah, the point the mayor's making, I think, is that we don't know if the quote-unquote 20% supermajority rule has been met or not.
We definitely don't have a signed petition. And that's what that statute requires, I think.
It says in writing, but
Yeah, in writing and signed.
So I just wondered, these notices that they express their opposition to, or the emails that they send us that are in writing,
I think what we're supposed to do is react to that combined signed things, that, okay, have we hit it or not?
Aaron, do you have any comments on that?
As far as I want to find I'm looking for the exact language to pull up. I I know that the Attorney General has accepted emails as sufficient for qualifying for signed documents when it's discernible where that email originates. So if it's coming in the form of email, that would not be an impediment. If we don't know the total land mass that each of these property owners own, that's something that we would need to make a determination on.
You're an echo.
In stereo this evening. So I think that we need to look at that closer. I'm pulling up the statutes that are applicable, the statutory language. You'll bear with me for just a second.
Because if these don't count as a petition, then
Well, and the staff has not received.
Well, did they know they could petition?
We got them off on an email about an hour before this evening.
Did those citizens know they could do a
The rest of the
petition?
written opposition's in fact, it's nowhere near 100%.
Right.
Yeah, but it's 100% opposed.
Right, but it's not anywhere near 20% of the problem.
yeah, it's over 20% of lot owners, but I don't know about the property.
Not the ones we received prior to the end of time. I think you've only got about 4 or 5.
4 or 5. Yeah.
Yeah, it's,
The rest of them we received 5 or 6 emails, just, I don't know, an hour and a half ago.
the standard's 20% of the land within 200 feet.
We have that boundary, but
And that's on, yeah, it's on page 47, so.
and it includes.
Whether those emails constitute something that could be used in this instance.
Well, look at me this way, okay? The only way to make that determination is through our GIS department. We received those emails after the GIS department was no longer on the property. So we had no opportunity to react, to determine what's going on.
But the trigger that it sets off is just the vote required.
Right,
Correct.
majority.
Okay. And this has already gone through planning and zoning,
Correct.
and
And all the opposition, written opposition that you see, our mail-outs have a deadline of 1 week prior to the public hearing. Because of the mail situation here, any ones we get prior to that public hearing are in fact. We do not enforce that deadline, but that doesn't include ones we received, a month after that deadline. There's no separate notice requirement for this public hearing other than the ad that we placed. There's no mail-out notice.
so with this being passed by planning and zoning,
Well, recommended.
recommended, for us to go against the recommendation, does it require a supermajority in this case?
Well, only if we make the determination that statutory requirement has been met. And like I said, the staff was not aware of any such thing while we had the ability to verify.
Right, but I mean, without taking in consideration these letters, just on a standard
We
vote.
had no reason to calculate.
Right. I'm just asking.
Right.
You know, in certain cases,
If we assumed,
council cannot go against the recommendation of planning and zoning without a supermajority. Does that apply in this?
No.
No.
No,
So let's just talk for 1 second about what the statute actually says. Section 211.006 of your local government code lays out the procedures for adoption of zoning regulations and district boundaries. Subsection C states that if the governing body of a municipality conducts a hearing under this subsection A, may by a 2/3 vote prescribe the type of notice required. Now, subsection D is what we're focused on. If a proposed change to a regulation or boundary is protested in accordance with this subsection, the proposed change must receive, in order to take effect, the affirmative vote of at least 3/4 of all of the members of the governing body. The protest must be written and signed by the owners of at least 20% of either, one, the area of the lots of land or land covered by the proposed change, or the area of the lots or land immediately adjoining the area covered by the proposed change and extending 200 feet from that area. In computing the percentage of the land area under subsection D, what we're talking about, the area of the streets and alleys shall be included. The governing body by ordinance may provide that the affirmative vote of at least 3/4 of all of its members is required to overrule a recommendation of the municipality's zoning commission that a proposed change to a regulation or boundary be denied. So there are two pieces to it. There are not specific requirements that I'm seeing. I'm looking for, when this particular section talks about protest, it only discusses in this particular subsection that it has to be written and signed by the owners of that 20%. There's not additional clarifying language regarding what that protest has to look like, what form it has to be in, other than it must be written and signed. As I stated a moment ago, the Attorney General has accepted emails as long as you can determine who that email is coming from as sufficient for meeting the criteria as a written and signed document. Now, I have not evaluated the emails that have come in with regard indicating opposition to this particular change. So I think out of an abundance of caution, we need to evaluate that to determine whether or not that 3/4 vote requirement would apply in this particular case. If you choose to move forward with your action this evening, then you can do that. If it does not receive the 3/4 vote, it could be subject, we may need to consider recalling the matter because it may affect what the outcome of the action that you take. The better path, it would be to evaluate what was received and to make a formal determination about whether or not those particular emails constitute the sufficient protest as this particular section would call for.
Thank you.
Would it be possible to do those calculations before we take a vote?
That is my
Tonight,
recommendation, that calculation be done. If council wanted to take a recess, or if we have some time at some point, we can evaluate those, we can certainly do that. I haven't seen them, and I understand that Mr. Jambor has not done that calculation for you yet.
Just a quick question. If we already were scheduled for one meeting and there was a few replies, now we're on our second meeting and a couple of more added to it. Is it possible to have 3 or 4 more meetings and then wait for the list to get bigger? I mean, it doesn't seem fair to me, to be honest with you. I mean, I think that if you're going to add the tally up, last week or the last time we met, that's what the tally should be taken from. Because I'm here now for the second time, and if they were upset about me, they should have showed up. I'm here. We're spending money.
This is an open meeting, isn't it? I mean, this is an open public hearing, yeah.
Yes, it is.
So input coming from outside would still count, not?
Mr. Mayor, there's not a specific deadline listed in the statute for when those protests must be received. If the city has an ordinance that specifies the deadline for receipt of these particular protests, then we should enforce that. I'm not aware that there's a specific deadline listed.
Plus, we don't know if they get the mail.
I was under the impression that when the meeting opens up at 6:30, that's when the cutoff time is for anybody that had a problem. Is that right, Roy?
Right.
But that has nothing to do with the statute.
And
Sorry, I'm out of my league then.
Like Councilman Davila said, this was a public hearing that was open. It has never been closed, so it's a continuation of the same meeting of
Yeah.
2 weeks ago. So, is the deadline prior to meeting that one, or?
So how many do we actually have? Because our property's 1,500 feet long at 80 feet, so there's, on the rear yard, so that's 20, 25 lots. Then across the street, there's the same. And there's a high percentage of people who haven't built their homes that border on our property that aren't living here. They're just vacant lots.
Well, I know there was 48 lots listed as being within that 200, but I don't know the,
So that's 20% of that would be 9 or 10.
It's,
Once again, it's the area.
but it goes by the
The
area
area.
of land, not the number of lots.
Whether, none of these were digitally signed documents that we received, whether that's a requirement.
What-
Certainly, there's a lot of attorney general prefer that, we got a greater email.
Would it be any benefit to recess? Would it be possible to do those calculations in recess?
Mayor, I want to answer two questions here. So one thing we can do is if city attorney wanted to verify the emails, that's one of the things she mentioned. We can gladly provide those and she can look at the emails and do whatever she can do. But to verify that, our GIS technician is gone for the day, not coming in. You would need to postpone and do something else if that's the way the vote were going to go. That's what I was trying to say earlier, is that that's not something that I or Roy can compute. We can pull it up and do a general, but general's only general, so.
We might be able to determine that they don't meet that. I don't think we can determine that they can. If they're at a fraction of 20%, you might be able to make that just estimation. But the other way around, it's tough.
Well, it'd be comforting to know that we have the figure that says that they don't meet that requirement, that we could move on and be done with it.
Right. And not have to go back
Exactly.
and readdress it at
Now,
At
we
another
don't
time.
have all the emails that the mayor received. We never received 14 emails from different parties. Don't know who they might be. Is that your impression? I think we got, what, about 6 or 7? And some of
And I think
those-
we need to consolidate them, because I know the city manager received some that I did not receive, and I received some that he
received one
didn't.
from me, I think.
Yeah, so Mayor, if you wanted us to look at a ballpark, a generalization, just know that at this point, we don't have the ability to do the exact measurements and give you that. I agree that we could give you that generalization just based on looking at what Mr. Attree said. That's 387,000 square feet. And then look at the other lots. I could only generalize to see size, if that's what we were doing.
I don't think we need to do that tonight. I suggest that we we keep the public hearing open and we address it again on October 3rd, when we have all of our information.
Is there a requirement for a petition? Did I not hear that? And the emails count as a petition?
Yeah, they do count.
He called it a petition, she called it a protest.
yeah, the statute says, speaks of it in more general terms. It just says, if the change is protested in accordance with this section. And the only thing that's noted, it says the protest must be written and signed by the owners of at least 20% of either of those two, the people who own the land or the lots adjacent, immediately adjoining the area covered by the proposed change. So this particular statute doesn't call for a formal petition in the way that a couple of other sections of our statute do. It just says protest, and has to be written and signed.
If our ordinance does not state a deadline,
If your ordinance doesn't provide for a specific deadline, the statute does not provide a specific deadline. If you were to close the public hearing this evening, but postpone a vote until you could confirm the actual number, that would create a specific end to
was my question.
to when someone, what protest you would consider. And that would at least give you the opportunity to do that. You haven't made a decision. The statute it doesn't speak specifically to when you can, what protests you can consider and what you can't. I'm not aware that your ordinance states that either.
It doesn't. I agree with the mayor. Therefore, I move that we postpone, it's the same kind of motion, consideration of this item until our regularly scheduled meeting, our first regularly scheduled meeting in October, in order for us to review the validity of the applications and potential legal issues.
Let me hold you up just a little bit, because I've still got a public hearing that's open.
Well, you say he wants to postpone the public hearing, or continue it.
Yes.
As opposed to closing it.
Oh, okay.
Right. Right.
I'm not sure that the statute says that there's a deadline of time for public hearing.
No, in fact, our ordinance says, literally lists that we can do what you suggested, and that was my motion.
Well, okay. Because here's, the reason I had that question is because, we've got to this point a certain number. I mean, do we continue to allow things coming in at this point? It's good, to be fair to Mr. Attry, how long do we extend this? And that's why Aaron was saying if we close the public hearing.
I'm sorry, I was supposed to be quiet. There have been situations where folks delivered stuff at a council meeting in writing, and attorneys have said, you've got to take them, and it's the same situation we're in now. You don't know whether 20% applies to not, and you had to postpone until you figure out how many people you need to pass it. And that literally is at the last minute. Now, having said that, that was also literally a game that the protesters were playing. But that's attorneys have told you, it doesn't matter. You get one in writing, it counts. So
What we can do to mitigate some of the harm is predetermining by having Chris calculate what 20% is, and then I can have all those lots listed and their sizes, and know that where I can do the math without GIS. I can at least be able to do that. Once again, receiving, we don't even have, I couldn't calculate what you got, that I don't know about.
Mr. Mayor, one thing that occurred to me is that we may be somewhat impacted by the recent change in state law that allows the public an opportunity to speak on any matter. I agree with Councilmember Robbins that if they submit it, even now is the public hearing, if someone were to come up to you with a written piece of paper with their name indicating opposition, that you would be required to accept that because there is no specified deadline. Because you are required on any item that you're considering to accept public comment, it's not tested. So if you chose to close the hearing this evening and leave only open your decision, you may still be in a position where an attorney general opinion would force you to have considered that additional protest if it's submitted at a later date because of the change in the law that allows them to speak. They haven't, the change did not specify whether it would require you to, how it requires you to consider that, but for any item that's on your agenda, the public now has the opportunity and the right under the law to speak on any particular item. It may change the game legally for how we could consider this, because previously, under the old version of the law, I think that you could have closed the public hearing, could have postponed this item, the consideration, the final action on it into another meeting, and not taken any further public comment on it, and not considered any protests after this evening. But given the change in the law, I think that the window is slightly open, and it's an untested question as to whether or not those would be considered valid.
So in the other question, the changes in the law and the time frame on making a decision, does that impact us at all on this case?
So there's not a specific timeline by which you have to make your decision. If the council, if there's a second on Councilmember Robbins' motion to postpone this to another date, it just, you can make the decision at your next council meeting, or if you were to have another special called meeting, or, whenever. There's not a specified deadline for this particular item.
Okay.
But I can literally be prepared so that get GIS to calculate the total area, need to pre-calculate the area of each and every lot, and be ready with a calculator to determine right up to the minute without GIS being here, whether you met the threshold or not. That's about the best I can do.
Okay.
A lot of work.
All right, so I have a motion by Councilman Robbins at this point. Do I have a second?
To keep it open but move it forward?
Yes.
I'll second.
Tim seconded. All right, I have a motion and a second. Any further discussion?
Mr. Mayor, one thing I would comment on, Mr. Ratchery, I'm very sorry that we're putting you through all this. I personally made one promise when I was elected, and that was that I would listen to the citizens and I would vote according to what they've told me. At this point, I've had enough negative comments that I can't vote for this rezoning. And I'm not at all in a position to tell you what to do or how to run your business. But it's seeming to me that the best thing for you to do is just go on and cut all those driveways and put all those houses on Boggy, make them single-family dwellings and go on down the road. And I understand what you were trying to accomplish. I appreciate your efforts, but your neighbors don't seem to be interested in having what you're trying to do. And I'm not sure that all the steps that you're taking and all the things that you're trying to implement are not going to create a situation where you just can't do it, and financially it's just not possible. So I'll just be upfront with you that I cannot vote for this rezoning. And I wish you luck in what you're doing, and I'm sorry that we have put you through all this.
All right. Any further discussion?
I'd just like to make a statement to Mr. Attry. I'm sorry that you're being put through this, but I think one of the things that I'm concerned about is doing the right thing. And to tell you the truth, I'm not sure what the right thing is to do right now. I understand your point. I also understand the point that's been made by neighbors that are opposing this. So I am really at a loss as to which way to go with this. I really believe that the overriding thing is to do the right thing. And I wish I knew what that was.
All right. Anybody else? All right. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed, nay?
Nay.
I abstain.
Okay, I have 4 ayes, 1 nay from Councilman Davila, and Councilman Weatherly abstain.
Isn't there something if somebody speaks during this position, then that means that you're for it?
I don't think so.
Something I thought I learned in TML. That once that's up, you make the motion, and before you vote on it, if you speak, then that means that you have voted for it.
Not necessarily, because you can, during your discussion, you could speak against it.
After the motion was made.
Yes. That's why you allow for further discussion.
That's right.
All right.
Before, so, yeah,
I'm
before,
overeducated.
before the vote is taken. All right, so the motion carries 4-1. And we'll hear this again October 3rd. All right. What number am I on?
The next one.
Number 7.
The next one. Action items. Number 7, discussion, consideration, and possible action on resolution number 19-1808, a resolution by the City Council of the City of Lago Vista, Texas, approving the 2019 Paving Rehab Program.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Excuse me. Before we embarked on this paving rehab program, the city manager and I went and visited city manager out in Horseshoe Bay. And if you guys don't know about it, Horseshoe Bay is kind of like the same way as we are. They have a lot of streets without any utilities on it, not a lot of development. So they created a paving program. So we saw what they had, and we took what they had and modified it and made it a whole lot better, we think. So this paving program, what you have in front of you is every single street in the city limits of Lago Vista. And those streets are ranked based on the possibility of development, how likely they are to be developed, and how developed they currently are, and how much traffic they get on them. And in the previous paving rehab manual that was done in 2016, that program was done what a typical city would ask for an engineer to do, which use what they call a pavement condition index type of methodology. That works for Cedar Park, that works for all the cities in Central Texas, but for cities like Lago Vista and Horseshoe Bay, it just doesn't work. A lot of these cities are already built out, and they use a pavement condition index, meaning that the road that's got the worst condition on it comes first. But if we do that, we'll be broke and nobody's going to be using those streets. So that methodology didn't make a whole lot of sense to us. So we went to a less used method, which is the pavement rehab readiness methodology, which uses a probability or a matrix that how much these roads are going to be developed in the future, and how much construction they're going to have adjacent to it. So you want to tackle the roads that are going to have less construction to them in the future, because if you do pave those roadways and 2 or 3 years from now there's a lot of adjacent construction on it, then in year 4 and 5 you're going to have to go back and repave it. So if you did a pavement job 3 years ago that you thought was going to last 15 years and you have to go back 4 or 5 years into it, you lost a lot of money. So that's the thought behind it. And the other reason that we went with this methodology is we surveyed all the streets, about 130 miles. We did leave a smaller portion unsurveyed, like the Sarah, for example. And we found out that about 95 to 98% of the streets need some sort of preventative maintenance, whether it's just it's very simple crack seal or seal coat, all the way to a total rehab. So all the roads to some level need to be rehabbed. So what you have in front of you is an expanded version of the 2016 paving rehab manual, and is developed more into a matrix. It lists all the streets. It lists them it gives them a factor from 0 to 200. Obviously, the higher factor is, the more likely or the more ready those pavements are to be maintained and or rehabbed. And what you also have in that list is streets with on alphabetical order. So somebody can go look down the alphabet and figure out where La Mesa is, and then they'll see when this street is anticipated to be rehabbed. Now, what's important to know about this matrix, it's kind of useless if the funding doesn't support it. Because if we say that in 2022 we're going to do this street, but that assumes that in 2021 and then 2020 we're going to put this much on these streets, and if we don't do that, then we basically keep on pushing those down. You're going to hear a lot of citizens, "Hey, you're supposed to pave my streets this year. What happened?" The other thing to keep in mind, Council, something when cities, something that cities experience when they concentrate on street rehab and they put a lot of money into it, there's going to be a lot of unpaid, unhappy drivers out there because it's going to impact their way of life. So we're going to have a lot of streets, possibly some closures, that it's going to be cumbersome to a lot of people. So something to keep in mind as we embark on this journey and we start spending money on the streets, that there's that difficulty or that downside of it. I'm here to answer any questions you may have.
So you mentioned future use, buildings and, construction, stuff along those streets as being a factor. How does that go against like current use of that street? Which takes precedent, current street?
The current use takes precedence. We looked at how many houses were either under construction or already fully built in that stretch of roadways. And also we did a utility survey, a service line for utilities, because you want to see that, okay, maybe there's not a whole lot of homes in it, like Omaha, for example, but all the utilities have already been built in. So you don't have the possibility in the future of somebody coming in and cutting utilities and ruining your roadway. So that street would technically rank higher than another street that it's in the same condition, that doesn't have a whole lot of utilities already built. Same thing with homes. If there's a street that has less homes on it and with another street that has more homes on it, a street with more homes as a percentage will rank higher than the street that doesn't have a lot of homes on it. So theoretically, it goes to reason that street is more used than the street that doesn't have anything on it or has maybe one or two homes on it, in which it's a mathematical solution, has no heart into it whatsoever. So we can't say that we were choosing this one because there's this thing that's happening on this street.
So what's the minimum level of maintenance that we're going to do for the streets?
Crack sealing is the minimum level of maintenance.
But I mean, we have streets that are crumbled away now. Are we just going to let those continue to crumble, or are we going to try to, I believe the tax-paying citizens that don't have their utility right now, at least if you inherit one of these lots or they try to sell their lot, we need to have the roads passable, right? So people can have access to their property without a four-wheel drive necessarily. So I'd like to know what the plan is to just, I know in the master plan a few years ago, we kind of written off areas that were going to be too expensive to bring utilities to them. Potentially people could be building off the grid and being able to inhabit those lots. So I feel like it's our responsibility to those citizens to make sure we maintain the roads to a minimum standard of drivable.
I think a lot of it's triage. I mean, that's what he's saying.
One thing I do want to
Under what circumstances?
One thing I do want to point out to council is that a street that gets used usually lasts a whole lot longer than a street that doesn't get used, believe it or not. Now, unless you go to a bogey four type of usage, which is abuse. It's not use, it's abuse. So if you go to that level, it goes to the other extreme. It's up to you, council, what you want to do. If you want our department to go to a different direction, the four of you got to tell us so, and we'll do that. Otherwise, council, just do keep in mind that a street that is completely gone costs anywhere between $11 and $20 per square yard. A street that's already there and needs minimal maintenance costs about $1 per square yard. So you could maintain the current streets that you are being used and put the maintenance needed on it at $1 or $2 or $3 a square yard. That will extend the life cycle of that pavement. Or the downside, if you don't do that, then we put money on these streets that don't have a whole lot of usage to them. It'll cost about 10 times more, and you're going to do a whole lot less because you have a finite amount of money. Just as an example, Bogey Ford, we're estimating about $700,000 for next year for Bogey Ford to overlay. We have $1 million into streets. That's going to leave $300,000 to do all the other stuff. So we're already a little bit behind what you may see in the report of what we are trying to accomplish by next year.
I was thinking it said it didn't include, the above funding does not account for rehab and maintenance of Boggy and Loman.
Right, on the street list, it does not. Yes, sir.
Can I ask a question?
Yes.
When you did the prioritizing of the streets that were going to be repaved or somehow rehabbed, was there any consideration given to the usage of those streets? In other words,
Classification?
The classification,
Yes, sir, absolutely, yes.
Okay.
We went from just the dead-end streets, which are our coves or the minor usage, we have to a local street that gets more points. Then you have minor collectors, major collectors, and thoroughfares.
Good, that's what I was hoping to hear.
So you may have no homes on Loman Ford, but that is an arterial, and you can't rank that the same as what you rank Crystal Way, for
Right.
example.
Exactly. I think that we'll hear when you start this paving on a large scale, we'll probably hear people asking questions about why that street and why not mine.
Yes, sir.
And I think those people need to be educated about the classification of streets and roads, because I think that will, it'll mitigate some of those complaints.
Mr. Mayor. First off, Eric, I'd like to thank you
Yes, sir.
and commend you for this program. This is something you and I have been talking about almost from the day you got here. And we have discussed over and over again things that could be done, the way that we approach this, how this gets accomplished. And I am very impressed with the program that you have put together. As far as streets that are falling apart and not being used, the thing that we need to worry about first are the streets that have people living on them right now. And we've got streets in our city that have families on them right now that the street is completely falling apart. I don't think that a lot of people are aware of what goes into fixing a lot of those streets, because it's not just a thing, I've been told again and again, well, just get the paver out here and throw some pavement over it. That'll fix it. That is not a fix. That does not repair the road. That doesn't take care of the things that are going on that have made it break down. Drainage, side of the roads, vegetation, getting that underlayment, that bedding done correctly are all things that have to happen before you spend the money on putting that extra layer of asphalt on top. All of these things take time, all of them take money, and it's something that we're going to have to continue to work on. This gives everybody a chance to look and see where their street is. It has dates, years set to fix it, and there are maps in this plan that will actually show you where they're going to be working. I've had people tell me, well, just get a bond, spend $9 million, fix the streets and get them all taken care of. Even if we did that, we would still be years down the road in getting all the roads fixed, because you can't shut down every road in town and fix them all at once. That doesn't happen. So I'm very impressed with the plan that you've put together, the way you've got it laid out. And I think that this will help us move on down the road to taking care of our streets and getting it back to the point where everybody can drive through town.
Thank you, Council. I do want to mention one thing, council members. The exhibits in the report, it only goes 5 year, only has a 5-year outlook, whereas the matrix itself goes many more years, a few more years beyond that.
It's 7 years, isn't it?
I believe so.
Yeah, I think
2027.
it's 7.
I have one other question.
Yes, sir.
I used to walk our neighborhood, and there's a street called Stillwood. If you were to go down Stillwood, there are holes on that street. I could have lost my wife on some of those walks if she had stepped in some of those holes because they're that deep. My concern there is that even though that street is hardly ever used, I mean, there are no houses that I can think of, but maybe there's one house on a corner that would use a part of that. My concern is that when you have that level of deterioration, somebody could end up in a situation where they have, damage done to their car if they fell into that hole. And I remember a situation when I was working in industry where a lady who was a computer operator kept complaining to the city about this one particular street corner where she turned and there was a big hole there, and she kept complaining and the city never did anything about it. One day she hit that thing and broke the axle. So she took the city to court and won because she showed that she had done her due diligence and made complaints, not just public complaints, but actual complaints. And, I would hate to be in a situation where we end up in those kinds of things, because for one thing, it'd be embarrassing to the city to have somebody sue us for something like that. So I'd like you to take a look at Stillwood. I don't think anybody drives down that thing, but if someone happened to do it and the right circumstance presented itself, it'd be a major problem.
That's what Don was requesting too, more or less.
I personally drove every one of the streets. I got stuck on a few of them, to be honest with you. So,
Well, I don't know if Stillwood is one of those streets that you looked at, but you might look at
I
that.
ask you, do you take a lot of walks?
Steelwood Court, 2024.
Let's see, the court, I think, is a different.
No.
Lane is 2023. Stillwood Lane is set for 2023.
Oh, so that's closer than Stillwood Court. Outstanding. That's still 3 years out, though. We're in jeopardy for 3 years.
Is that the one across the street from you that's just grass? There's one, there's just a sign up there. I think it's like,
Now, this has paving, and it's not near I don't live in that neighborhood anymore. I just used to travel that way when I lived on
I think you're
a different street.
paving the future for something when you continue to go on walks and then your wife disappears one day in a hole.
so this list here, is this different from the list that was included in our budget?
it is exactly the same list. It's rearranged, has exhibited on it, has some
I didn't know if the
added
one in the
information
budget
in.
had the scores applied to them
I
yet
believe
or
so,
not,
yes,
and
sir.
whether the scores caused it to.
It is the same list. It's just more. It's a full report versus simply a list that was in the budget. I could be mistaken on this, but maybe Aaron could fill in. I believe there may be a state statute that protects cities from anybody having damages on potholes or damages in their vehicles or injuries. I don't know if that's correct or not. I seem to have read something on that recently.
But not running off the road and hitting boulders, evidently.
Wouldn't think so.
Yes, this is very nice.
Good, thank you.
I know the citizens have been asking for a long time for something, at least for a year now.
This is a built-up of what engineers that the city hired did in 2016, so.
Good job.
Thank you, council.
All right. Is there anybody from the audience who would like to address this issue? I do have one more question. Let me go back up here. So the recommended funding, total program funding, recommended funding, all that's figured into our budget and our current, and the projections for the next 2 or 3 years.
Yes, sir. So as Eric pointed out, the CIP that was approved gives us the $1 million, and then some of the improvement dollars are in the $1.37 million street fund. And as he said, the request for next year is included at $1.5 million with the similar number for the street fund as well for the improvements.
All right, so we got the funding in place, we just gotta make sure we stay on pace. Any further discussion, questions? All right, this is an action item. It is the first time we have heard this.
Is it an action item?
But it is an action item, so we can take action on it if you,
Mr. Mayor, I am personally for going on and approving this. I make a motion that we approve resolution number 19-1808.
Second.
all right, I have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Hearing none, motion carries unanimous. This will be on the website Monday, right?
Yes, sir.
Wait, I forgot to look where my street was. Number 8, discussion, consideration, and possible action regarding resolution number 19-1809, a resolution of the City Council of the City of Lago Vista, Texas, affirming a fiscal and budgetary policy for fiscal year 2020.
Mayor, this is a first hearing. It is under action item, but it's a first hearing of the fiscal and budgetary policy. And basically, it's affirmation of how the city is currently operating for fiscal controls. The reason it's an affirmation is because the council has already approved this policy in 2016. What we're asking is that instead of just going with a periodical review of the document, council implement this into the annual budget review process for any type of updates that we want to do for the upcoming fiscal year. So we're calling it an affirmation, but we want to have it as a review so that we know that we're not only operating under the policy, but that council is putting eyes on it annually. And for staff-wise, Mayor, one of the previous questions you had asked is if there hadn't been sufficient time for council to review, then we're okay with this item and the next one, putting that to the first October meeting for a second. We just want to make sure that we're presenting it at the same time as the budget consideration and then looking at these two documents.
Questions, comments?
There's no change to what is being done right now with this.
Mayor, the staff is not proposing any changes to the current operating policy.
My only question would be, if this is what we're doing, we're not putting any changes in it, is this something that we need to wait until the next meeting for?
Or can you take action tonight?
No, we can take
You can. Any of these 7 through 10, you can take action. generally, we try to hear things twice, but there's always exceptions, so. And a lot of these on our agenda tonight are administrative and kind of self-explanatory. I mean, if you do have questions and you want to review stuff, then definitely we'll hold it, but.
And what we want to do, Mayor, if council did take action, or even if we do not, we want to implement that back into that final budget document. So if you recall, after council approves the budget, we'll put in there the signed ordinance by the mayor, we'll put in the vote sheet, we'll have the full, complete exhibit, and then we'll have a message, and then potentially put these policies in with that document so that when we put it online, or if it's at the library or city hall, people can review the entirety of the document. That way you're not having to look for multiple documents. Just trying to streamline it. I mean, you mentioned the website. I think it's an integral tool for us to put everything together, and hopefully someone could look back and just follow the policy to see why certain things were done that way.
Will you entertain the motion?
I would like to open this up to the citizens
Okay.
to comment on this.
Okay.
Sir?
Okay, Ron Smith, 20609 Oak Ridge, has 6 things to point out to you. Page 112. Under A, funds governed, down where it says proprietary and enterprise funds, especially for the new council members, both golf and the utility fund are both considered enterprise funds. Okay, and it says so right there in that sentence. The reason for pointing that out to you is I'm going to take you to the next page, which, look on page 119. If you go to page 119, it says enterprise fund rates. And it says the city has undertaken a 7-year plan to review and adopt utility rates. I believe you need to insert and golf. I don't know why golf is excluded. It's an enterprise fund. It always has been an enterprise fund. So I think you need to insert the word and golf there. Going down a little bit farther, page 119, number 8, revenue monitoring. Of course, golf seems to have a revenue problem, but the problem with this language is it talks about budgeted revenues. I believe that the finance department here budgets on a flat line. In other words, you just take the budget and divide by 12 and level load it. But when you get to golf and utilities, they're both seasonal. And so they have a variability in them. They roller coaster. So I don't know how in the world you implement that. So either you need to start doing your budgets with seasonality in it, or you need to rewrite the language because it's flatlined or level loaded, if you will, for the budget. For example, golf, you could generate a lot of revenues in the spring and the summer, but you don't generate as much in wintertime, but the budget's level loaded. So you're going to get variances every month, and you're not really reviewing those things even quarterly. Okay, to the next page, 127, types of debt. Number 1, general obligation bonds. Read the first sentence. Original issue general obligation bonds must be authorized by a vote of the citizens. Folks, I have never voted for a general obligation bond. I never have. This says you should. Are you? Well, then you need to change the language.
Well,
If you're going to take away my time, then I'll, can I have some of my time back if you're going to talk?
Mayor, I think the state, I think we might want to listen to what he's got to say, but I think the last statement's in there. But
Okay, okay, number 2, revenue bonds. I think the revenue bonds should be used for golf and for utilities because they both have revenue streams associated with them. In particular on the utility bonds, because I really frankly don't want the citizens to vote on some of these utility bonds. It really needs to be covered by the revenue bonds. You really don't want citizens saying yes or no on whether you're going to fix a sewer system. You really don't want that. So you need to be able to operate inside the fund, and the only way you do that, you pay for it through revenue bonds. Now, yeah, the argument's going to be, yeah, you're going to pay a % more on interest. Well, gee, Mr. Mr. Collins said that the rates are going down, so I don't know why you'd worry about interest rates, especially 1%. So why don't you do revenue bonds on both utilities and golf? So that's kind of a behavioral change, a paradigm shift, if you will, from what you're doing now to what this document says you should be doing. Okay. Next page, 128. Number 5, internal borrowing between funds. City can authorize the use of long-term reserves as loans between funds. Loans should be repaid within 18 months, considered as working capital reserves. Okay, so what's happening here is every time you guys make a transfer, for golf, for example, $507,000, you're taking money out of the general fund and you're transferring it over to the golf fund. And behind the scenes, probably on the books, they are taking and creating a loan, an IOU, if you will, back on the books for the golf course. In other words, the general fund's waiting for the money to come back. We haven't made money in about 11 years. So you got 11 years worth of accumulated IOU sitting up there. Okay, so there's 2 ways to solve this thing. Number 1 is you pay off your IOUs, which is probably over $5 million, or you forgive the loan, if you will. However, I don't know that you can forgive it because you've got 5 MGA golfers up here, and that'd be a conflict of interest. So I don't really know how you get out of that particular box, to be honest with you, because how in the world are you going to forgive it if the people voting for it are the beneficiaries of it? So,
I use the sewer system too,
yes, and you pay for it through your water bill and it has a revenue stream to it.
and I vote on it.
And you don't, and they don't go to general funds. Maybe they should, I don't know. But, maybe we should go to the general fund and, pay the water bill. But I don't know that's the right answer. So the bottom line is I think there's some significant things I don't think you should vote on tonight. I think you got some serious paradigm thinking to do on this document. And I don't think you're ready to vote yet until you figure out exactly how you're going to do those 6 things. Okay?
Thank you. Let's see, where did that start? 117?
Have we ever voted on a general obligation bond without approval for the city?
Mayor, from what we have now, we actually have, if you look down the sheet, we have CO bonds, not the GO bonds that don't require the votes on those. So when you look at our debt sheet, you'll see those items on there. And then the way that is a good point about loans, the way that the budget for the enterprise funds work are they're dedicated appropriations for another fund and not a loan to another fund. But if you're going to loan it, then you're going to want to have this repayment policy. But if it's a dedicated transfer to that fund, then it's not considered that loan. But looking at the policy, it's a good area to look at and review.
Well, something I noticed also, we have a third enterprise fund that's not listed at all.
Mayor, you're correct, because at the time, the airport was not considered its own enterprise fund, and so we haven't listed that item.
So do we need to go, I think we should go back and make sure that's in the appropriate places as well. Because it may need to be addressed under several of these subchapters. All right. And thank you, Ron. I had your sheet, but didn't realize we were on number 8. Anybody else? Comments, questions, council?
I think I'd like to put that vote off for sure. I'd like to study that a little bit deeper.
All right.
I'd ask that the legal counsel look at those areas and determine what modifications need to be made.
All right, we'll move to number 9, unless anybody else has any comments. Discussion, consideration, and possible action regarding resolution number 19-1810, a resolution of the City Council of the City of Lago Vista, Texas, affirming an investment policy in compliance with the Public Funds Investment Act.
Mayor, this item, as you just read, it comes back from the Public Funds Investment Act, and it creates a requirement for the city to create an investment policy. The city has an active investment policy, as you'll note in the staff summary and in the first couple of pages. The policy has 4 main objectives: safety, liquidity, public trust, and yield. What the staff is requesting is the council consider adding this as an annual review of a policy, and then that be included in our annual adoption process of a budget. As previously stated, this item is the first hearing of its nature for the council.
So when would we review this and the budgetary policy? During the budget cycle, or would this be done at a different time of the year?
Mayor, what we'd like to see is if we're planning on having a typical first meeting in September as our budget adoption, then we'd like to see this happen in a June, July type of situation. That way we're getting this out of the way in terms of reviewing these policies, and we can easily cycle that back through at any time. But we'd like to have it as a midsummer and then focus on the budget after that. What we don't want to happen, Mayor, is the bookshelf policies that maybe our finance director looks at, recognizes, and she and the auditors are the only one looking at it. We want to make sure we keep it in front of people so that we all know this is how we're handling our dollars.
Questions, comments? Audience? All right. Well, again, this is the first reading. We can hold off on this till the next meeting, or we can take action. All right, hearing no action, we'll move to number 10. Discussion, consideration, and possible action to purchase real property, Barcade Ranches Plat 11, Lot 11, Lot 11339A from Bob Mitchie, and to authorize the city manager to execute the contract and sign all purchase documents.
Mayor, this item has previously been discussed before as part of a long-term plan for the Rusty Allen Municipal Airport in an effort to acquire properties and to be able to add new amenities to the airport facility. Originally, the city purchased some property from Jim Awalt that is adjacent to this property, and therefore this property became a higher priority. We've discussed this with the Airport Advisory Board previously, and it was an area they wanted us to have dialogue with this property owner. Council discussed it. We had some dialogue, and then that dialogue broke down. The opportunity came back within the last couple of months to purchase this property. City Council authorized staff to execute an appraisal on the property. We have received the appraisal, and I believe we have the secondary confirmation appraisal for the amount of $250,000. Staff is requesting council to act on executing this purchase of property and to use TxDOT Aviation reimbursement dollars of 90% funding to purchase this land.
Questions, comments? No? Anybody from the audience?
Mayor, there are, I put the purchase price on there. There are a couple of other expenses that would go along with purchasing the property. One would be including, even though council already authorized the appraisal, we'd like to have council take into consideration in your action, including those additional items, particularly ancillary services, whatever the closing costs are, so that we can use this action by council for our reimbursement from TxDOT. So I apologize, but not having the solid number on these items, but the survey and title fee, closing cost, et cetera.
And that's a 90% reimbursement?
Yes, sir. We'll use all of that package together, and we'll submit that back for the reimbursement request.
And none of those extra costs go to the property owner?
Yes, so that's correct, Mayor. So the property owner amount will stay at the 250, and if council provides that direction, then we'll execute that so that there's a purchase price and then the closing costs are separate.
Well, this is the first reading, possible action. We can either hold off onto it till October, or we can take action.
Mr. Mayor, we have discussed this at length, and with the appraisals, I don't think that there's really going to be much of anything that's going to change by our next meeting. I would make a motion to approve the purchase of the property at Barcary Ranches, Plat 11, Lot 11339A from Bob Michie, and authorize the city manager to execute the contract for the price of $250,000 plus closing cost, and to authorize him to sign and purchase the property.
I'll second.
And to include the appraisal.
All closing costs.
All closing costs.
All right, I have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, nay. Hearing none, motion carries unanimous. Consent agenda. All matters listed under consent agenda are to be considered routine by the city council and will be enacted by one motion. There will not be separate discussion on these items. If discussion is desired, that item will be removed from the consent agenda and will be considered separately. We're looking at number 11, approval of September 5th, 2019 regular council meeting minutes. Questions, comments? All right, audience? Nope. All right. Hearing none, I will entertain a motion at this time.
Mayor, I'd like to make a motion that we accept the consent agenda as read.
I'll second.
I have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, nay. Hearing none, motion carries unanimous. Discussion item, discussion on board and committee appointments.
Mayor, we've briefly had this discussion before, and it's come back around full circle. We have 4 vacancies on 4 different boards. We have vacancies on the Airport Advisory Board, Library Advisory Board, Building and Standards Commission, Planning and Zoning Commission. 3 of those boards have those vacancies, those terms expire this December, as in 2019. The Airport Advisory Board position actually doesn't expire until December of 2020. The question from staff is, does council want us to wait on those reappointments until December, or do you want to proceed now? If you want to proceed now, which of those appointments do you want to bring before the council at this time? And then third request is for, I believe it was Building and Standards, we were talking about potentially adding an extra person onto there. So
Board of Adjustment.
apologize, Board of Adjustment, which is not on that list. We would add an extra person or persons to that, to the Board of Adjustment. So that's where we're at in terms of wanting to have that dialogue fleshed out so we don't screw it up.
Well, my stance is unless there's something that's detrimental to, forming a quorum or anything like that, that we just continue with the standard procedure of advertising and filling them in December. Just take effect first of the year.
Question?
Yes.
Did we not just complete that process where we had applicants reapply?
Mayor, that's correct. We did put it out, and we do have applicants for these positions. I don't know the exact number. Roy and Sandra will know the numbers on them, but our only concern was just getting to this period and appointing someone for a 2-month period.
For an expiring term?
Correct.
Yes.
It was a substantial number of applications.
I know as liaison to the Building and Standards Commission, they would like to see that vacancy filled, even though it is an expiring term. So my recommendation would be to proceed with that filling of that vacancy.
The needs to fill these vacancies is going to be there whether some of us are on the council again or not. And it seems to me that it would be to everybody's advantage if these individuals are selected and know that they're going to start serving in December, rather than waiting until, the end of November. Give them more opportunity to plan for meetings and to assume their post.
Yeah.
Well, if they're a vacancy and they're appointed, they would start immediately. They wouldn't start necessarily in December.
Right.
But our standard procedure, and I don't know if it's in ordinance or in our charter or wherever, it's not in our charter, but I believe our ordinance is that we identify everything in October, we take applications in November, and then we appoint them in December to start 1 January. That's the way our ordinance is written. So there is a clause in there for vacancies.
What I was going to add, Mayor.
I don't believe our application process is closed at this time, because if we go by our ordinance, we wouldn't be opening up for applications until November.
And if we appoint anyone at this time, Mayor, you're correct. If we appoint them to an expiring term, they would fill out that term, and then those positions would come back up to the council at December.
Right.
So that's.
So anybody we appoint now, if their term is expiring, we would have to, they don't just roll into the next year.
The beauty of that is it could give us a trial run on anyone, so we could try them out and.
Yeah, there's no reason to expect that if someone is appointed, that they wouldn't be reappointed when their term expires. I mean, I would think that the expectation would be that they would continue.
Right, but you also have to, again, because of the way the ordinance is, you've got to allow people to apply. You got to identify those positions in October and allow people to apply in November.
Is that an ordinance?
I'm not sure.
I don't, yeah, that's,
It wouldn't seem logical to me that, I mean, if we're talking about making new appointments, that makes sense, but reappointments, to me, it doesn't seem to be something that would be logical to wait until some later time to appoint somebody, even though the term is expiring, when there's a need. In other words, if we had this occurring mid-year, we would still want to probably move forward with that, as long as we advertise the opening, or the vacancy, that is. I don't really see why we could not proceed.
Right. So you can fill the vacancy. So we advertise the vacancies, we took applications, we can fill that. But they have to know at least these three, library, building and standards, and planning and zoning.
Well,
They have to know that their term expires December 31st, and then we have to identify them and take additional applications for those positions. And they have to be considered. Whether the liaison for that board chooses to reappoint that person in December, it's up to them, but.
that's correct, but I think the importance has to be given to those positions that are vacant that actually are positions associated with a commission or a board, because I think all of these different boards and commissions that we're talking about have semi-legislative ability.
What action would need to be taken to expand the Board of Adjustment?
Ordinance.
Yeah, that would be.
And that's part of the discussion, is if we want to go ahead and move forward with that, we should get that ball rolling for the October meetings, so we're moving ahead.
It takes even more. That's in chapter 14, you require a public hearing.
And that way at least we're ahead of the game, so come January 1-ish, we're ready to do such.
So the question now is, can we cherry pick this? Can we
cherry pick this?
Yeah.
Pick which ones you want to bring up.
Yes.
Yeah, you can do whatever. We put the 4 on here because we know we have those vacancies, Mayor. So you can do that, and then with the other, you can just give us that direction to start, just like you would say, put these items on the next agenda.
So can we hear from the audience on this before we go much? We've got the former mayor, Dale Mitchell, here, and he's one of those that's he's an applicant right now for the library board, and it's expiring. I'd just kind of like to hear what his thoughts are. If you take that position and, it's got to be advertised again 2 months later, or does that bother you at all?
Doesn't bother me at all. The normal process in the past has been whenever there's a vacancy and the liaison brings it forward to the council saying, hey, let's advertise it, fill it now, and then reappoint when the term's up. I mean, you've got rules for how you fill a vacancy on the city council as to how you go through that process. You don't leave it empty just because you have reappointments coming up in 3 months.
I think that was a great example, Mayor, just because not only do you have one person going for that position in here, you have 2 people in the room, so we could try one out, and again, 2 months in, decide this one really wasn't the right one, and then go with another one. So
He's not very experienced.
I'm just saying.
Yes.
Kevin Sullivan, 3933 Outpost Trace. I had to think about that for a minute. I'm mainly going to encourage Councilor Davila and the city attorney to speak up on this. At the last P&Z meeting, they talked about there were some rule changes from the state and that they have to respond more quickly than they have in the past. And David, Councilor Williams, and the board were very interested in potentially getting that spot filled so it will help them respond quicker. So if y'all maybe speak up, and if it's an issue and we should, fine. If it's not, but David seemed to be interested in trying to fill that one. Thank y'all.
Mr. Mayor, I think it's going to be very important for your Planning and Zoning Commission to keep those spots filled as continuously as possible, and to have the council seriously consider either reinstating the, not substitute, but the backup,
Alternates.
the alternate process, or having additional folks available, in particular for plating applications. The P&Z is going to be subject to the potential for multiple special called meetings if you, until we make some serious adjustments to your regulations regarding when we're going to accept applications, should you choose to go that way. And because the timing, it affects the timing greatly, you're going to have the great potential for any new developments if Roy sends back those applications to those applicants for additional information, corrections, whatnot. Once they bring it back to us, if there's a plating decision that has to be made, that commission has to meet and make a decision within 15 days. And so if you have missing folks from those commissions, it makes it that much harder to ensure that you're going to have a quorum so that those decisions can be made. Otherwise, you end up in a position where those applications are going to be deemed approved if they don't act on them. We're no longer going to have the flexibility to postpone those decisions to a later meeting. The decision has to be made, and so it's really important to have your Board of Adjustment and your Planning and Zoning Commissions fully staffed. And the committees that have more advisory power, it's less critical, but it's always good to have a full crew for anything so that you have the broadest decision-making input for any decisions that are going to affect your city.
Well, and that's why I said, if it needed a quorum, if there was something that was important, we needed to fill it, then yeah, we need to fill it. The ones that weren't so important, I just said, wait, because I know on your council appointments, it usually goes by 180-day thing. If it's over 180, you fill it. If it's under 180, you wait till the next election. So, I was kind of looking at the less important decisions, kind of like that. But
Well, let me,
Alternates requires public hearing.
yeah. Can I weigh in on that? Right now, we have the potential for a tie vote when we have 6 people that that serve on Building and Standards, P&Z, Board of Adjustment. So to me, that is a critical aspect to consider in filling those vacancies. With regard to the Library Advisory Board, maybe that's not quite as critical, but I do believe that it's in the best interest of those committees and commissions and boards to have those vacancies filled. Because if there's a potential to have a vote come up, and if it's a 6-member board, committee, or commission, there's a possibility that you have a tie. And so I would like to forward that idea as a determinant in whether or not we move forward with filling those vacancies.
Well,
And I believe, if I understood the process correctly, we've already advertised for filling these vacancies, so I don't really see why we, the liaisons, cannot review those applications and then bring that to council next time for a vote. That would be my recommendation.
all right. So we can make direction to staff to have this on the agenda for October 3rd? With
Yes,
all
sir.
the applications, does that give everybody enough time to
Plenty.
review the applications?
Does me.
All right. City manager report.
Mayor, my only report is, someone mentioned that Mayor Pro Tem might have wanted to make a comment. I just figure if he wanted to make a comment, he should have been here tonight. So I don't know why anybody's making comments for him. That was it, Mayor.
Well, he gave you something to read, but I
Well,
chose not to read.
that's what I'm thinking. Unless someone's standing up for the guy. No report other than that, Mayor.
All right, future meetings. Consider schedule and items for future council meetings. I have one. It was pointed out to me that staff is going to be at a conference 8, 9, and 10 October. They would not be in the offices to put an agenda together for our October 17th council meeting. So I tried to get Sandra to work from the hotel room in San Antonio, but she said no. She wanted to go to the Bjorkes Law Firm dinner instead.
There are a lot of dinners to attend.
So staff has recommended or requested that we move our second meeting in October to the following week, which that Thursday would be the 24th. Thoughts?
I like the idea of moving to the
I'd like to know
24th.
if the city manager figured out when he's going to be done.
That'll work.
I gotta check my schedule. 2, 5, 8, 11, 14, 17, 20, 23. I get off at noon on the 24th. Okay.
All right.
I'm good with the 24th. It's 24th.
Do we need a motion to that effect?
No.
No,
She
we'll
says no.
actually, yeah, we'll just advertise and satisfy the advertising requirements.
Okay.
Just a general question. Do we have to advertise Because I think it's listed as a regular, do we have to advertise the canceling of it and then a separate advertising for the,
You'll have to put out notice that that it's canceled.
okay.
And then the notice for the new meeting would be the 72-hour required notice as your city
We can do
manager.
it all in one though, right? Do we have to have two separate?
You can do that. That's a good way to let the public know that this one's canceled. We're holding a special called meeting in lieu on the next date.
Great. I think I've given you all my agenda items already. Anybody have agenda items or anything? Nope. All right. Executive session. Do we have any reason to go to executive session?
No.
All right, I will call this meeting adjourned at 9:14 PM. I'm waiting to